some articles out. And I just thought it would be useful for us to go through that and have Jim walk us through where we've been and how we got to where we are. And so Jim has got an hour's long presentation on that. I've asked him to hold it to an hour. Jim, do you want to take questions throughout, or how would you like to do that?
I certainly would, actually. If you, I think it would be better if you ask stuff as we go, if you have any questions. I don't know if anyone has looked at what's out on the website, and what I have printed here doesn't have the link. The link is on your, screens, the HTTPS cityofkeokuk.org/current-landscape-2/. I started putting some articles out there back in October, and kind of with the idea that I thought that as we entered this budget season, it would be good to have some information that was out there that people could take a look at, that you could refer to, and just to get some background on maybe why we're where we are at, how what we're doing compares with what other communities are doing, to sort of give us an idea. Are there some, where would it make sense to maybe consider changes if we need to make some changes? And I thought putting it out on the website, and then actually even here doing it in this forum prior to getting into the budget, where passions aren't out on the table as you're dealing with trying to make things balance, would at least give a good backdrop to what's going on. So I don't know who is taking a look. I know we pushed it out onto Facebook last week, and I know a few people in the community have started to look at it. I've had some people within the employee group have taken a look at it too. And just, as anyone who has something that comes up and you see something that you just kind of wonder about, I do encourage you to ask. One of the comments that I had seen that somebody posted with even the website comments or the website postings, wondered if there was going to be a SID Center article. Well, I wasn't planning on it, but the SID Center is something that has cost the city a lot of money over the last few years. You know, we did an original bond amount for back in 2019 for a little over $2 million, I think. We still haven't made a principal payment on that bond. We don't make a principal payment on that bond until 2030. We lose money on that center every year. It's a big cost to the city, especially when we're in a spot where we're not financially even.
Once we get all the committees set, I would love to get the budgets figured out. I would love to sit down and have some serious meetings.
And yeah, we have a group that's been working on this, or having discussions on the SID Center over the last, well, since July, like we're making any progress on it. We are looking at different options that could be available, whether it is getting it sold, occupied, used for a different purpose. Oh, great. I love this. And we do need to get some options out there. We have actually looked at some other options that, you know, including, is it potentially something that we use for using for housing in the community and at some point in the future. And so I don't know what the right solution is. We just have to look at different alternatives that are out there. This year we had to fund renovations that were done a year and a half ago or longer at the SID Center.
A year and a half, 2 years ago.
That KEDC, is that correct? Keokuk
Yes,
Economic
KEDC.
Development Corp. had done to the space that Roquette was in, about $300,000. We just had to pay for that. This year, that means we're having a deficit, a cost to the city for that center, with including paying off that loan, $350,000. Next year's budget, we're budgeting to lose $80,000 on that center.
Right, and I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about it later, but to me, when we're seriously looking at the situation, we gotta get rid of those lost leader situations.
And
Minimize our exposure on this stuff. Right?
yeah, I would be in agreement. This budget, we came in with what was requested from departments. If I were to just put it into the general fund, the way it was requested was a $2.1 million deficit. We can't operate that way. We're looking at a $2 million deficit in this year's budget. And we came into this year with $4 million. Absent changes, that puts us out of money in the general fund. So that's not viable. All right. It's a good backdrop anyway. On the website, the first article I talked about was population decline. What's happened in Keokuk over the years? We had a population peaked at 16,000 back in 1960. By the time we reached 2020, we were at 9,900. Current estimates, 9,400. By the time we reached 2030, estimates is for us to be at 9,000. You can look at the number of active water accounts in the community. We lose about 40 accounts every year on average. That means there's 40 houses on average that are no longer being used that were being used the previous year. We do a housing demolition program, 200,000 a year. We're not getting rid of 40 units each year. We're falling farther behind as a community in terms of housing that's usable, that's standing. There's more and more units that are vacant every year. As we talk about issues for what we're doing, if we were in the Des Moines Metro, we'd be talking about how do we deal with growth issues? How do we, as the population increases, how do we expand the number of police officers, the number of stations that we have, the number of fire stations that we have? We're in a community that you're going the opposite way, and that's not an easy thing to talk about or to deal with. And it's not something that you do just off of the cuff. It's something that you have to plan on. And how do we make sure that as the dynamics of what our community is change, how do we adjust with it? Now, one of the dynamics that would be nice to change is to solidify, stabilize that, so we don't have future population growth. And that's certainly something to work on and have as a goal, but we're not there yet. And until then, we have to be working on budgets with the idea that we have a population decline, that we have a smaller group funding the same services every year. City of Keokuk property tax valuations. The main driver of being able to fund operations in a community is property taxes. As you look over the last 10 years, our average change in taxable value, what's available to collect property taxes off of, has increased 0.4% a year. What's inflation? Is it 0.4% a year? We're falling behind every year just on base operations. And when we have a majority of our community included in tax increment finance districts where we capture growing value, what growing value there is, our actual taxable valuation has averaged negative over the last 10 years. It's a large reason why we've gotten to a position where we're now at a $2 million deficit in the general fund that we had budgeted for the current year and are set to be in the following year, absent any changes. One of the ways that we've dealt with that lack of growth in property valuation, you still need revenue to cover costs, right? So we've gradually increased the levy, the tax asking per $1,000 of valuation every year. You can go back in 2009, this graph shows we were, just under $15 tax levy. As late as 2023, it was $18.95. And in the last 3 years, it's increased. I see a table later that shows that it's increased 40% in the last 3 to 4 years to try to keep up. So, but where does this stand? What does it mean that we have a tax levy of 2626? Is that $26.26 per thousand of valuation? Is that normal? And if you look at the other communities, this is a list of the communities that are the same size as us, 7,500 to 12,500. There's 22 towns in Iowa in this size range. If you're wondering if we're on the lower end, no, we're on the lower end of the table. It's the highest. And if you look at how the community's tax askings is, where we sit in comparison, I mean, we're not only the highest, we're highest by far. There is a stark difference in what we collect versus what other people do. And it impacts people. It impacts businesses. I don't know what our highest, yes.
I was wondering, we were talking the other day about this public housing. They just put up a new building. How many more are they going to keep putting up? And as far as, you know, we have people that have rental places that are not getting rented because they're building a new building every 3 years. And all that money is going to the federal government. And we're not seeing any impact. We're actually, do we keep building them? Or should we put
It's a private, well, it's a private developer that did that. That had nothing, we weren't involved in it, but I don't know, Brian, do you have any background on?
Just a little bit, but, I mean, we were involved because the council gave them permission to build it. I'm pretty sure Pram, recommended we not do that, but that's neither here nor there. If you do look at, I just know from speaking with Mr. Ansler at the Housing Authority, before that was built, and Jeff probably knows a little bit about this too, but we had, you know, there's anywhere from 40 to 50 units already available in town for low to medium income that aren't filled before they built the new buildings out there. But obviously the new one will fill up because it's brand new. I don't know what the solution is for that, I guess. I know the consensus probably in the community is we need more moderate and above income housing, whether it's houses or apartments, not the medium to low and down. But I don't know how we get there.
Well, I think as a nation, more people are renting every year, and getting out of home ownership. So, I mean, that's happened nationally. If you look at the nation, as far as, you know, the landlords and stuff like that is a problem. But I think that, you know, we do have overall a housing shortage in this county. My personal belief is, it used to be if your house was on the market, you might have it on the market 6 months or a year and a half. And a lot of these homes are selling in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So the decent houses are selling. You're always going to have a problem on the higher end, but decent housing gets done quick. And that's the first time I've ever seen that in my lifetime.
And I think that this kind of discussion, that the questions that have come up here is part of why the mayor is wanting to look at doing a housing task force as time goes on.
I was just going to say that those will be questions on that.
Housing task force. I very much recognize the issue that you're discussing. You know, one of the concerns I have is even in a community where the population is shrinking, we've had, I think, a handful of housing starts in the last 4 years. That doesn't breed success. As we start talking about different alternatives, as Mr. Peepler came in tonight And what they're looking to do is one of those options that needs to be out there. We need to find ways to provide viable alternatives that work within this community. Can I move on, or, because I do see that as an issue.
Please do.
Levy comparisons, my goodness, as I get older, I have a harder and harder time looking at tables like this. I started as city administrator when I was, 26, and I'd make these big tables that were really, everything was small, and everybody complained they couldn't read them. Like, what do you mean you can't read it? Now I'm there. There's a lot of information in here that I kind of wanted to be able to have out for folks to look at. 22 towns, population 7,500 to 12,500. I put in here what the taxable valuation, a column, is for that, and then what the per capita, the per person valuation is for these towns. And I highlighted that next column, the ones that are below 40,000. And when I was in Burlington, I highlighted the ones that were below, I think it was like 32,000. Because of it's just the dynamics of the size town, the town that you're in, the valuation, the property valuation that's there to support services makes a huge difference, a tremendous difference. If you're below 40,000 per capita valuation, or somewhere in that line, you have a comparatively harder time funding services than if you are in Clear Lake, Iowa at 100,000 per person valuation. Clear Lake is able to fund out of their general fund a low property tax asking street work. We can't afford to cover any of our street costs out of the general fund with a levy that's 2.5 times as high as theirs. It makes tremendous difference on what you're able to accomplish in a community. But I also wanted, the last graph, that tax levy comparisons, where we're so far out of whack with what other people are doing, other communities are doing. This table kind of talks a little bit about what are the categories that have driven that. Debt service is what has been historically one of the drivers. The other is employee benefits. If you look what our debt service levy is at $7.46, the average community is $2.26 per thousand valuation. We're close to 3 times the average debt service levy. That has been driven, one of the things that drove it, it's all Tom's fault. I'm going to blame it on Tom. If you go back to what happened to the sewer department's revenue specifically, when we lost ADM in the community, you lost maybe 1/3 of your volume through the plant, half of your volume through the plant. Not quite half the revenue, but a good chunk of the revenue through that plant that supported it. All of a sudden, the community got left without the ability to cover that debt service cost. And so we had, instead of the sewer department covering its debt, we had to move over to property taxes having to cover it. This last year, we've passed a new sewer rate for residential service that has some pretty good size increases over the next couple of years this fall. And the goal is to get this tax levy for the debt service portion below $3. Not down to the average community of $2.26, but at least within a reasonable range of what other communities are doing, if that makes sense. I also don't want to get it too low because we still have other projects that we're going to want to do over time. And when it comes time in a year or two and we want to do another, I guess it's 2 years out before the next bond issue, we want to make sure that we can cover that bond issue and not have it be like the last one where we're not making a principal payment for 10 years. That'll kill a community to keep doing that. We've done that on 2 different bond issues now. The next one needs to be one that is done, maybe not exactly how you want a bond issue to be done, but an awful lot closer to how it should be done. As I mentioned, the employee benefits were at $9. The average community is at $4. The next highest community is at $7. That needs to get back into range. If we pull those two pieces into range, our tax levy will get maybe not down to the average community, but at least we'll get into the range of where we look comparable to other towns. It makes a difference. If you're vested in a community, you're going to be here anyway. But if people have a choice of where they're going to go and they look at something that's far out of whack, they're not going to be a part of it.
And that's including like businesses.
That's including
Factories.
businesses, factories, people. We want to be somehow within a compromise situation, we need to have things where we're still providing services. So we can't make cuts and just get rid of everything, but we have to do it in a way that what we're charging fits within the typical range. If that makes sense. Is that enough on this one? The city of Pella put this out. It was in their budget book last year. And they were trying to show how well that they've done in not holding the line and not raising taxes. We're showing what had happened over the last 5 budget cycles in different communities. The average town in their little comparison chart had a 7% increase over 5 years in their property tax levy. We had a 41% increase. You took us out of that comparison group. The comparison group only had a 2.8% increase. We are the increase in taxes. I mean, other communities are having to do it too, but it's just done it more here over the last few years. And somehow that needs to get under control. And actually the budget that I'll be talking about trying to get you to work towards will get this back in line with what the other communities in this comparison group are. Again, the debt service levy comparisons. And again, most of these charts that I have here are almost all in the articles that I have up on the website. So we're going through these somewhat quickly, but you can refer back to those at any time. So I guess if you're looking at debt service levy comparisons, it kind of makes sense if we're at $7.50 and the next highest community, Waverly, is at a little over $5, that maybe we're using more of our debt service than what other communities are. And that's what you see in this next graph. So the state of Iowa puts limits on how much we're allowed to borrow. They look at the overall valuation of the town, and they say that you can't have more than 5%, and then I get lost if that's taxable valuation or actual valuation. I think it's actual valuation in outstanding debt at the end of the year. For us, at the end of this last year, that 5% figure was about $38 million. We ended last year with $28 million of outstanding debt. So we have plenty of room, but you want to have room. Zeth, one of the things that I want to do for the PD, get you a roof on there so that you're not having water in your basement. If that roof collapses and you no longer have a building, what are you going to function? That's a $5 million if you have to go to a new building. That's almost a warehouse. Your last estimate for a new building was how much? For those who can't hear him, he said 12 million.
And that was 5-6 years ago.
Did you do that just for police, or was that for all public safety?
That was for police and fire both.
And that's trying to go to build in a way that meets current policing standards. The firm that you had that did that is Estes?
I was out of Kansas City.
Oh, so it wasn't Estes, okay. That when they go and make these estimates, you can do things cheaper than what they're saying, but they're saying if you want to have a service that functions really efficiently, this is what that structure should look like. That $12 million facility that you had an estimate for at that time would be more of an 18 million at this point, based off of, if you're trying to do it that way. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you need to do. Fort Madison is just opening up their new fire station. Carly Nelson did that. I think that was a $6 million facility for them.
But I mean, they're not a public safety. It's
Nope, it's
and it's a
just fire
smaller
department.
fire department than what we have.
So has there been any consideration of repurposing the SID Center for a public safety building? Perhaps maybe keeping the firehouse where it's at?
There was a study that was done on that a long time ago, and the determination was that it would cost more to renovate that to be an effective public safety building than to just build new, if I'm correct. Brian, I believe you found that
Yeah, it
document
was,
somewhere.
it was done in 2016, when the city and Roquette were negotiating, the city taking that building. The consensus of the firm that did it, that it would not be viable for a public safety building.
However, since then, the building has undergone a $350,000 renovation for Roquette.
That
So
was,
that had to have helped out a little bit to get it in shape, you know.
that was, the Roquette remodels consist of about 6,500 square feet of the 78,000 in that building. So it's not.
But it's
and
currently a
just the way
building that we're
just the way
paying
that it's laid
for
out is not really.
already.
What's
You know,
that?
we're already paying for it already, and it's unoccupied. So
The
it might be
for
something worth
It's,
taking. a
it's
closer
certainly
look.
something that could be looked at. The utilities on that building with hardly any usage in it is $120,000 for electric for this year. It's just inefficient. Long-term, that you can't afford to have just the electric bill on that
It
facility.
may be too large of a building, to be quite frank. It may be too large of a
And-
building, and there's some other concerns with the fire department and their trucks and where you're gonna house them at in that building and
So,
things of that
and-
nature, but.
We've looked at some different facilities over time, before I was here. But the discussion does make a lot of sense about repurposing, but it needs to be the right facility.
Well, and the firehouse, I would keep the firehouse where it's at, still put a new roof on that building. But as far as, I don't know, you know, as far as maybe if we're left with either build a new one, which we can't afford, or maybe use an existing building, which we really need to repurpose and quickly, then maybe there's a deeper discussion that can be had there.
And it would be easier to repurpose a building for a police department as opposed to the fire department. They have some unique needs as far as storage for their equipment and their trucks and things.
I think these are all points that need to be worked on as we move forward. They're not this year's budget, but they are things, I mean, part of it where it may fit in is if the SID Center, which is an issue, is one that comes in and actually is what you would say is viable to do something with. But long-term, with what's done, you want to get them into the right facility that will do what they need long-term. And maybe that's ultimately what happens. I'm not looking for an answer on that right now, but we do need to find something that works better than what they're doing, I think. I mean, long-term, that's what you would like to see.
Yeah, I mean, that building over there was essentially, it's been pieced together over the years. That front addition was added in the 90s sometime to an older building, and the workflow is not efficient for a police department. It's just not.
So the point that I was just trying to make with talking about debt usage is not necessarily to whether we can do that now. I think that it would be nice to put ourselves in a position to have that be a viable discussion as we move forward. And to do it in a way that doesn't, and that's part of where I'm talked about wanting to have a debt service levy at the right level. I don't want to pull it down so low that in another 2 years, you're doing something that now all of a sudden you're raising it again. Something that I would, to the largest extent that we can, get our rates to where that they stay steady as time goes on. It helps people to know what to expect. It helps when you start moving it up and down, it causes more angst than if you just leave it at a steady level. And make sure that we just manage things as we go forward. What I did want to point out here is we're more highly leveraged than the majority of towns. We can certainly do what we're doing, but we're on the upper extreme, even at the 70%. We're not alone. In this group, we certainly are. Burlington's at 70%. The city of Des Moines at 70%. There are other communities that are too.
You know what falls off and when?
A lot of it is backloaded.
So we've got it for a while.
I mean, we have two separate issues that were no payments for 10 years, and then we're 10 years of payments after that, so.
I just think that we kicked the can down the road for the last several years without really dealing with it.
So some of these are things that are pointing out issues that are here. We need, dealing with them, there are things for getting through this next fiscal year that are about making the general fund work for this next fiscal year within the context of not violating any long-term parameters, not creating problems long-term. There's some good long-term planning that can occur, that we can do some things as we move forward, whether it is on doing housing initiatives, finding a different facility for police and fire, or making the facilities work correctly. I think those are things that we can do as we move forward, making sure that we have a good street plan. We haven't put together a new street plan for 3 years now. We need a 5-year plan that is going out and looking out farther out. But those are the luxuries of getting through this budget cycle, and then let's do some good long-term planning.
I guess, and I'd interject here too. I meant to say when I was going through that mayor's report earlier, and I did mention it when I was on the radio this morning. One of my goals would be to have a goal-setting session for the council this fall. Unfortunately, we walk into this in January, and we've got to have this budget certified for this year. But there's a lot of things, whether it's housing, as Todd mentioned, or whether it's public safety or whatever, that we really ought to be doing some long-term planning and some goal setting for what kind of things do we want to get done for the city of Keokuk. And I meant to mention that as a goal that I've got set too, and I'd like to set that for this fall. So, but as Jim has said here, we got to get through this budget on a certain time frame right now. So I would see that coming this fall.
May I ask a question about the SID Center? Can't we winterize that building, like drain the water, why are we spending?
Currently we have a lease contract with tenants right now.
Okay.
So it does have occupancy in it.
Oh, okay. I thought it was empty. I'm sorry.
All right, we're half an hour in, trying to get you done in an hour, because if anything I know is that the more time we spend, the more overwhelmed everyone is, and people shut down anyway. No one wants to listen to me talk that long. My wife will tell you that. Again, outstanding debt, the average community, 27%. We're at 73%. One of the things that I did point out here, it's not like other communities don't have issues. Take a look at Fairfield. $48 million of sewer revenue debt. They're the same size as us. That speaks of some major problems that they've had to go through, and they will be paying for that for a long time. So it's not like we're the only community that deals with budget issues. What I did want to show out of our GO debt at just shy of 28 million coming into this year, out of that, about 7 million is actually sewer revenue debt that's been converted over to GO debt. If that was pulled over into the column, like a lot of these communities are paying just revenue bonds and not including it in their GO debt, our percentage would come down. We'd still be the highest percentage community. So some of the reason why our percentages of usage of debt is so high is because of the nature of what we had to do to deal with ADM leaving. All right, so other things have impacted the general fund. There's this article that I had put in here in regard to what's happened through this, was it Southeast Iowa Regional Gaming Commission? SIRC, something like that, it's close to that. We split funds that come out of the casino up in Burlington between ourselves, Burlington, and Fort Madison. Each community gets about 33%. Historically, Burlington puts theirs into their chamber, funds primarily economic development. Fort Madison has a separate gaming fund that there's a group that helps there's grant applications that are available for nonprofits in the community. They put that money into some significantly large projects, but they also have it available for small projects that local nonprofits can go after on an annual basis. So they have that funding available. Keokuk has had the money come into the general fund and just be used for, it's not designated towards anything really, though it did help to support what we do with tourism, Main Street, several nonprofit groups in the community. There was a decision a couple of years ago that we shouldn't be getting that funding. It should be being used similar to what's going on in Burlington and Fort Madison. And the decision, this goes back before when I was here, but there was a decision made that that money was going to go away from Keokuk. And you see that in what's happened with the revenues. We had $470,000 of revenue back in '22. They started a process after '24 that said this money needs to transition to being a separate pot of money. It's not just being dumped into the city's general fund. So fiscal '25, it was reduced to we only got half of the money that was coming down to Keokuk. The current year, we're getting a fourth. The next budget year, it's completely gone. So over the course of about over 5 years, we went from around that at a peak of about $470,000 in revenue that was going to support general fund operations to nothing next year. And I can't really see where we've cut services out of the general fund to match that. That's under city control. That's not going to happen. Those funds, however, are here in the community. Anyone have really good information that they feel comfortable saying correctly?
Yeah, I looked into that, and I actually talked to a few people, and the synopsis I got out of it is that Keokuk was putting the money right in the general fund, and that's not what it was intended for. It was intended for specifications like goes to tourism, or goes to fine arts, or goes to different organizations to be dispersed throughout the city. But it's kind of what I said earlier, and it's just that we took that $500,000 and just threw it in the general fund, in my opinion, and the opinion of them, and just not honestly looking at it seriously. Instead of looking at what we're doing now, and looking at the budgets, and looking at where we're going on our revenue stream and our income level and everything else, we just took that $500,000 and threw it in the general fund. So when the gaming commission came to us and said, "Where's that money going?" They were told, "Well, it could go to this or it could go to that." I don't know. Was the answer they got 15, 20 years ago. So it's been on the radar for quite some time that they weren't happy with the way we were spending the money. For example, Fort Madison and Burlington was giving them a spreadsheet exactly where every penny of that money went over the year, and we were not fulfilling that obligation. So it's a little frustrating. In my opinion, it's a little frustrating that we lost that money. The good news is it's still going to tourism. I've talked to Kurt Brandenburg about it a little bit, and they're looking at doing some major things with the money. I don't know what that is, I think. But some of this, you know, some of these events that money used to be used for, hopefully these organizations can go to the tourism round and ask for some of those funds. Kurt told me that they're looking to do a major project. So I don't know how they're gonna play out and give it to local organizations. But I guess my point is, to answer your question, it's just that we just doing the general fund to keep things going, status quo. Simple answer.
So as time goes on, I mean, they did look at us and what we were doing, and they weren't happy. It's now gone. Part of this budget that we're going to be presenting, I mean, I don't know how we fund any nonprofit at this point. I mean, we've lost, in particular, right here, this 500,000, shy of 500,000, but a good sized chunk is no longer there to support operations. And I don't know what's going to be available to groups for capital projects moving forward. They are speaking of a vision of trying to make it to where it's similar to what Fort Madison does. Fort Madison does have an annual application that's available for local groups to do projects. I'm really hopeful that something like that will be there, and hopefully people will stay tuned to what happens there and make sure they work with tourism to see where their plans to proceed. I'm really hopeful that they get something out soon that's fairly concrete and open. I don't know if you have anything more, Kathy, because I know that
there was a lot of groups that with that money that we actually supported. And so I mean, if we go back and we look where those funds went, it wasn't willy-nilly. And there is going to be a lot of groups that will not, you know, be able to get the funds, but they can go over. It sounds like they'll be able to go over there and still.
but it may be a different process, and it may
Right.
not be for the same
Well,
things.
they may have
So
different ideas.
yes,
Yes.
So we don't know that. But to answer Tyler's question, I was told that.
So I was just curious if this was on their radar for so long, why wasn't that corrected over time? So it didn't even become an issue, you know?
That's a great question.
And if it is some sort of punishment kind of for the way that we channeled that money, can't we channel it in proper directions in the future and reacquire that money?
no, it's gone. That boat's gone.
The good news is it's still coming together. I mean, that is the good news. And all we can do is put our hat in the ring and work with tourism to see if they will help us in this organization. And hopefully they'll see that picture.
All right.
That allocation history too, Tyler, on your screen there shows they kind of weaned us off of it for a few years.
Well, the first couple of years, that's just changing in what happened with gambling revenue. The first 2 years. And yep, this current year is back to 460-ish range total. So it is going back up this year. Unfortunately, we only get 115.
But they cut our amount for the
Yes.
last few years. And so we didn't lose 100% of funds
All at once.
one time.
Well, unfortunately, we haven't made any cuts, though, to what we were funding up until now. Well, this year, we're going to have to.
Yep.
Another issue for revenue reductions in general fund, just kind of what goes on with local option sales tax. I had two different things on the website, actually. One, an article on local option sales tax, the other, a court opinion from 2004 in regards to the usage of local option sales tax and how it was being done here. At that point, they determined that we weren't doing things correctly in terms of how we were using the property tax relief portion. For those who aren't familiar, when we put local option sales tax in place originally back in 1993, it went to a vote of the people and said, are you willing to put a 1% sales tax in place? for the specific purpose of setting aside 10% for human development. That includes things like the library, recreation, cultural expenditures. Set aside 40% for infrastructure, which is streets. You could technically do a new building or a building renovation with that. Trails fits within infrastructure. And then 50% for property tax relief. For property tax relief, you can essentially use it for anything as long as you can show that you are, as a result of it, reducing a levy somewhere, a property tax levy. But you have to specifically show what levy you are reducing and not using that you otherwise could have. And the trouble we ran into back in 2004 is that we weren't doing that. The current year's budget, we had budgeted to put all three of these allocations into the general fund. The 10% for human development is easy to justify. The 40% actually for infrastructure this year, we satisfied with between the trail and then the airport project that's done out of the general fund. But the 50% for property tax relief, we only have one levy that we're not going at the maximum amount, and that's to cover airport. The airport levy is, you can levy 27 cents, which raises about 84,000 in the current year. It'll be 87, maybe 88,000 next year. That's the one levy that I can say that we're not using currently. Otherwise, we have to find a different use. Well, I'm going to be presenting one for covering some of our capital costs that puts it in a structure that we can legally back as part of this budget process. So that'll come, we'll have those arrangements happen the last half of January into February for what we're looking to do for using that funds. Long and short though, that money is not available in the general fund just to cover base operations without saying what you were using it for. You have to specifically be able to identify what you're using it for that matches these categories. Does that make sense?
I was asked Jim too, if we can, this is a 1% local option sales tax, and that's the maximum allowed by the state, correct?
Correct.
So I was asked by somebody, can we increase that? And the answer is no.
I mean, there's this because of conversation, but you know, some cities do like I think some cities do a small city tax, sales tax. Is that something I would not do?
Nope. No, in fact, one of the things that I miss or don't like that we don't have, they have they have a park tax. They set up park boards that fund park operations over there. That would be really cool to be able to do. Not from a taxpayer's perspective, but from running operations, it would. But our state does not allow that. Kind of wanted to talk about what happened in this year's budget. Well, for one, you put some people into a bad spot for trying. I mean, there are people who are having to do budgets on the fly, not ever having done it before and not knowing what they're doing. But part of it with how the numbers ended up in the budget just showed things in a way that wasn't what's actually happening this fiscal year. The budget that was approved by the council last year the general fund was shown having about 2.2 million of positive cash flow, which you always love to have 2.2 million more money than you have costs. But there were some things that were not quite how things worked out. We showed a $1.8 million borrowing for a fire truck to buy a new fire truck. Well, we received the money last year. We also paid for it last year. But we showed the revenue coming in for the current year, but no expense. So, I mean, it just made it look like we had $1.8 million off the top than what we really did. And then the other things came up with how projects were being shown. And I don't know what happened with how this occurred, but like the two projects at the airport, and the way they were budgeted showed project costs of 100,000 and receiving grants of what, 1.1 million? That doesn't mathematically make sense. But I get it. These budget forms are not easy to use, okay? And getting used to it and having something like that happen with people caught in spots is just not easy. The actuality, instead of gaining a little over $1 million off of those two projects, the projects are going to end up netting out a cost to us of oh shoot, I want to say like 50,000. Is that going to be right?
That's what it says, yeah.
So the airport projects, really, any airport project that we can do with 90 to 95% federal funding is a win for the community. But you have to be, it's just showing the numbers correct in here. Yeah, thanks. Numbers I can actually read. But the other project that was budgeted was the trail project. And I mean, for one, it was budgeted $1.1 million cost project. And I think that might have been what it originally was, but this project was delayed for 6 years from the time it was originally grant awards provided. Was that 2019? 2020?
It started in 2019.
2019. And we
I
didn't
think
get
the
it.
last re-estimate that, I wasn't at the city this time, I was with the engineering firm, but the last re-estimate that the DOT asked for would have been 2022.
Okay.
And then you can't change, that's the money that they use for the grant funding, and then that's what you get. You can't change that. Then we had multiple delays with mixing of different governmental agencies.
Yes. And yeah, and part of that, we have 3 separate grants that are funding this. But when it was originally budgeted, it was budgeted with a anticipation of a $1.1 million cost, about a 1.7 in there. I lost track of it. Okay, it'd be at 1.7 because we were showing about a $600,000 gain on it. So we said that we were going to get $1.7 million of grants to cover this project. Well, we have 3 separate grants. I think one of it's 100,000 from Hy-Vee, and the other 2 are about 850,
Yeah, and then we had a private donation of 100,000.
which went into the general fund several years ago and is just
However long
gone.
ago that was.
So we received an actual, well, I don't know that we'll receive all of that this year, but by the time the project is done, we'll receive grant funding of about $960,000 on a project that's costing us $1.3 million. So it's about a $350,000 net cost to us. If we had budgeted those projects correctly, not allocated the revenue from the fire department purchase, the budget that was approved by council last spring was a budget that had a $2 million deficit. And it was
$2.2 million surplus.
And so it makes a huge difference in how you all approach, do we need to make cuts? Do we need to do something different? Do we need to find other alternative revenue sources to make things happen? It just wasn't there for a discussion point last year because this was not seen. Well, we're there now. And this is what, 50 minutes? And I have multiple slides. Most of this is just tables after this. And I'll go through a little bit, but really it's more for you to kind of review for background material. This isn't like this is a brand new problem. We just didn't notice it. It's been building for a few years. We lost money in fiscal 25 as well. When the franchise fee was put in place the electric and gas franchise fee was put in place back in 22, 23. It provided a brand new source of money to the general fund of 800,000 a year, and we were doing net, I guess, maybe a little bit more than 800,000, just shy of $1 million. Net new money that hadn't been there before. Well, since that occurred, salaries alone from that time to next year's budget have gone up $1 million, let alone the loss of franchise fees and other costs going up. We're now in a situation where there's going to be a big pain in how do we deal with this as we move forward. Departments are all going to present their budgets. There are going to be shortfalls in there when it comes to trying to make the general fund work. I'm going to want to give you a couple of options for what to do revenue-wise, because you do have options on the revenue side. In fact, one of them I don't have a slide in here on, but it's on the website on that same page where all these other articles are on the franchise fee. When you look at what was done with the franchise fee when it was originally put in place, you put a 3% fee on electric and a 2% on gas. The state allows you to go anywhere from 1% to 5%. When we put those in place, we established them and said we're not going to raise them until we promise not to raise them until 2027. You can't raise them until 2027, but certainly next January, if you can, which is part of this budget, you can have some discussion about, is that something that we should look at altering what we're doing with the franchise fee as part of the solution to our deficit? Does that mean that we'd be out of line with other communities? Well, if the average community is a 3% franchise fee, but you see the gamut anywhere from 1 to 5. And as you look over time, it's going up. Communities are more and more challenged fiscally. More and more communities are ratcheting those levies up. There are 200 communities in the state that have an electric or gas or both franchise fee. There were only a couple back in 2009. It is building over time, the number of communities that are using it and the percentage that they are charging. If we were to look at options on the franchise fee, raising it to the 5% fee, which is at the maximum, but still within the range of what other communities do, would provide another $800,000 of annual revenue. The 2% raise on the electric side, 3% on gas. There's another option within how franchise fees discussion go that is part of the discussion. Alliant Energy has, if you look at the communities in Alliant Energy's territory that have a franchise fee, we're one of only 2 that is providing a rebate back to the industries. If you look at Mid-American, they do theirs differently, how the rates are done with them. There are, I think, 3, maybe 4 communities within Alliant Energy that have a lower fee that they're charging to industries than they do for residential. That rebate that we're given, there's like 5 or 6 communities across the state who provide some sort of a discount to industry. And when I'm looking at a bad financial situation, that doesn't make sense to me. But it's a community discussion. It's one that you have to figure out where's the right balance as we move forward. The rebate, we pay about 200. I think we're online to pay about 200,000 this year in rebates to industries. So there's about $1 million net revenue that is at least you can have the possibility to discuss to offset a $2 million deficit with franchise fees. That kind of makes sense?
So that is totally in our control on that rebate.
It's in your
I
control.
wonder if that had something to do with back when equalization.
When,
Rates back in.
no, this had to do, when you were originally, who was involved in this original discussion?
It had to do with trying to make it so that we didn't run industries out of town.
Yep.
Yeah, and they would be paying an exuberant, for example, Amstead Rail, they're the largest electrical consumer in the entire state of Iowa due to what they do at their plant, and it's electric based. And so, there was a lot of give and take to try to keep it fair to the industry as well as the citizens in town when we implemented the franchise fee.
And that's not going to be a different conversation this time around. So, I mean, you got to know that every one of the items that we're going to have to talk about for making an adjustment is going to be a pinch point on somebody. They get a rebate that's on 2 separate major accounts, yes. They get I don't know how that's set up. They have like 3 different bills that they did rebates forms with us. I think. But yeah, it's only a portion of their usage, and that's the same with any industry. The state has a formula for what they don't charge sales tax, and it's the same formula that we use in the rebate structure.
So they can get a rebate on the manufacturing end, but not like on your office.
Correct. From Alliant, through the system, yes. We are a very high rate structure area.
Right, but in the state, at least in our region, it's supposed to be equal. For example, we're being charged the same now in Birmingham and Cedar Rapids and all that as well. So 20 years ago, when we had equalization, we were the highest. We were on my and then we left this little line, we were the highest in the area. And we would file AUV. Utilities board, we're kind of equal. So that's why well, we're supposed to be the same as Birmingham and Cedar Rapids. Supposed to.
Yeah, Roger, that's gas,
Yeah, that's.
the gas utility you're thinking of.
We should be the same as the region.
I'm halfway through my slides at an hour. Actually, the last few slides are all state forms and I have all of these out on the budget on a website under the finance department. But for those who take a look, the state has some mandated ways of looking at it or presenting expenditures. They want it to do within these little systems that track how you spend money by categories, and they do it for comparison purposes between, so when they can make all their tables at a statewide basis, similar to me doing it here. And I kind of, over the 6 slides, looked at how we spend money by different categories. Like on this first one, it's all the public works categories that the state identifies. How much do we spend in the general fund versus what other towns do? And, we're 900,000, the average town is 650,000. And when you look at what is different, really the thing that stands out is our other public works category. It's some of our staffing, which we're going to pull out of the general fund for next year. It's going to get distributed out to sewer, sanitation, and road use tax to cover more of that salary cost and try to get this area to where it looks a little bit more towards average. And as you look at through some of the different ones, I mean, nobody spends money on health and human services, or hardly any. It's just an area that went away decades ago. Culture and rec, the one I have highlighted in orange, 3 different things on that comparison tab that are out of normal for these communities. Decora's building a new library, a little bit over $2 million that they're spending on that. We had the trail we budgeted 1.1 million, and Then Grinnell is doing a major park project for about $1 million. Might know it's more than that, that they had identified in their other culture area. So, but even with that, we're fairly average. If you look here, this is, and I kind of talked about it in the notes on the articles. If you look at the communities that are not, or in yellow versus not in yellow, there is a significant difference in funding. The communities with higher property valuations spend way more money on different recreational programs. They just have the ability to. Community economic development, we're not really anything out of line with how we do that. General government is pretty typical. I highlighted our other general. We have a $750,000 that's budgeted in there for an expense that really shouldn't be in this area. It's a pass-through. The water department and housing authority pay us, and then we cover them on insurance. It should be in a special revenue fund and shown there, as opposed to, because it's not, it's a cash neutral, it's an in and out. And hopefully I remind you to make sure it gets on there in that this year. So that'll look a little bit more typical. But this, I think that there's going to be some discussion about what are we doing for expenditures, though, out of general government. I think that that's going to have to be part of the discussion. I mean, part of the discussion, do you need a city administrator? I mean, it's going to be one of the things that's on the table, because not everybody has one. You're going to have several options that are going to be out there as to how do you close a gap. And I did want to highlight this, and I don't know that anyone's going to be in favor of it, but this is the area where we are different from other communities. Public safety. We have unique needs. And you have to try to balance out, do the unique needs that are here, do they justify where we are so different from what other people are? Average community spends 4.2 million, we spend 7.1 million. The next highest expenditure of any of these communities is 6.3. We're spending 800,000 more than any other community in our comparison group. And again, it's not that you can justify it. It's just, make sure you're balancing it out and make sure that you're justifying it for the right things. I recognize we have a high crime rate, and we have things that we need to deal with. So prioritizations make sense. It's just make sure that you're being fair and demonstrating it, and recognizing it. And what I did behind that, I did 2 different emergency staffing. One of the reasons why, back on that other slide, fire departments, there's only 2 departments in this category that are solely full-time fire departments. It's us and Fort Madison. And there are unique things here. We've got a major industry that really drives the need to have professional staff. But we're the 2 towns that used to be 14, 16,000 population and have shrunk. I mean, that's what led to us having full-time departments earlier. The rest of these departments, it's not that they don't have full-time staff, it's that the majority of them run a combination department where they have 10 to 15 full-time staff, a little bit less than our 19, and then operate off of a bevy of volunteers that supplement. Some of them are towns like Boone that does, what does Boone have? They have 10 full-time staff. They budget to have 2 part-time positions filled every shift. And they're filling those with their volunteers. Their volunteers is a group that they've developed over a period of time that can fit in, and they know that they have potential to get on the crew there when retirements happen in the future. So it's really a training ground for their full-time department too. There are different, again, Fort Madison and us have different things that have happened. when you shrink in size, you change population sizes, it changes the dynamics of what you can and cannot do. It also changes a little bit of dynamics of what communities typically do. Smaller communities, if you go to towns that are below 4,000, 5,000 population, it's all volunteer. You go to towns over 20,000 population, it's all full-time departments. We're in that nebulous middle part, and we just are suffering from having been a larger town shrinking, whereas these other communities are growing. You know, it's, when you grow, you end up bringing on people. And I think I put that in the article talking about Pleasant Hill. They had, I think it was 5 last year. They now have 8 budgeted full-time positions. And just built a brand new station, and their population base has grew 18% since 2020. I mean, they're a town that is rapidly changing on going a different direction than what we are. Changes don't happen overnight. And as I even bringing up an option there, I don't even think that talking about changing what would do staffing wise is something that you talk about for next year's budget regardless. Because I don't think we wouldn't, even if we wanted to and the community was on board with it, we don't have the infrastructure in place to do that. You've got to build a volunteer network before that can ever even be considered. But it certainly is something that should be considered as time goes on. I think it needs to be part of the discussion about how we deal with long-term needs, even if it's not something that we talk about for the current year. And again, I'm not talking about saying that you don't need a full-time department. You need I think it makes the most sense to have a combination department, a mixture of full-time and part-time. Even looking at what Fort Madison does, I don't know what their calls for service are. They certainly have the same industry needs to hit. They're operating with a 16-person staff versus our 19. That's a $300,000 difference in funding costs. For a same-sized town, a lot of the same needs, and they're still solely a full-time department. Again, I don't know that that's a discussion that is any viability for this year anyway, but it's something that I think needs to be part of the talk moving forward. And then, sorry, Chief, your department, the staffing I have on here too, we're on the higher end, but again, we have high calls for service. And so it's an area that I feel needs to be hit on, and I know you want to be able to talk, so go ahead.
Yeah, looking at it from a dollars and cents perspective is one thing, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So I would caution against that. I mean, I know that there are decisions to be made, but just viewing the community and the police department and the fire department from a lens of dollars and cents versus other communities, there is a lot of other things that need to be considered, and I know those will be considered.
And that's part of why I made the comment, just because we're the highest dollar amount, that's not the only thing that you need to have as part of the discussion. It needs to be part of it and recognized, but now justify it, and try to figure out how do we make everything balance out. Because right now, I don't have great answers for how to balance out a $2 million deficit. I can cut out parts of it. I can cut out well over half of it, but there's part of it that I cannot do. Not without making a lot of people mad. I mean, that's just the long and short of it.
It is frustrating for everybody. I've been on council before, so it is hard to do. It's a struggle. We can't continue to be the highest and be successful. We can't be the highest in unemployment. We can't be the highest in property taxes. We can't be the highest in everything that's not good. And continue down that road and keep losing population. So I don't know what the answer is exactly, but it's not going in the right direction. And there's no way for our here to do.
No. And, and I don't have staffing levels for other areas, and that's good and bad. I mean, this is the one that is in the high cost area, but City Hall, we're gonna have 2 retirements this next year. And do we need to look at different variations on what we do with staffing in here? I don't think that we do something different staffing in here without causing major issues in and of itself too. But I think it needs to be at least part of that talk too, is what are options that are out there.
I think that definitely that, you know, I think that the council that sits up here and the citizens that reside in Keokuk, I feel that there's been a lot of talk about something different. We need to do something different. And I do think that there are a lot of people are open to the conversation. I think that you bringing it up tonight and just putting the raw numbers out in front of us so we can look at it. Yeah, and really know where we stand if we want to, you know, stay on the road.
So Jim, give us a real high level of what's coming next, as far as what's coming at the next budget meetings and when we can expect proposals, et cetera.
I'd like to have something that was developed for proposals. Part of it, you're going to have the budget presentations from the different departments over those next 3 meetings. But that's really going to just talk about why they're saying what they're looking to do and why they have the equipment that they're looking to buy or whatever it is that they're doing. One of the things, I need to get you a list of what I've already kind of cut out of the general fund, some of it looking at alternative ways to cover. Like I'm looking to take funding for housing demolition out of the general fund. I'm looking to take all of the police cruiser that you got in there, fire department equipment out of the general fund. I think you've got a side-by-side and a wreck to take out. Put into a separate, I still want to do all of them, but I want to do it in a way that I can use the local option sales tax money and justify what I'm doing. We're going to present a short-term borrowing where we look to borrow about $1 million, fix the roof down at the PD. You have a backup generator you need, and I think a boiler issue too.
The issue with those components is age. I
Yeah.
mean, they are very, very old. We haven't had any significant issues with them, but they're very old.
They're just at the spot where they need done. But I'm looking to set up a structure where we borrow money in July and pay for it in the same fiscal year to cover those costs. Where's the money coming from? Out of local option sales tax. Then I can use the property tax relief money to cover it. There's more than one way to skin a cat if you do it. But so that'll take care of part of the issue. I don't see how we fund any of the nonprofit groups that we've been covering I mean, they're $10,000 to $15,000. It's vital funding for each of those groups, but I just don't know how I can present a budget that says we're going to fund them. We just don't have the money to do it. I think that, to me, just looking at things, I would do the franchise fee and go up to the maximum and do away with the rebate. But that's awful lot easier for me to say than you sitting in these chairs with people who go and talk with you. You know, I can't pretend not to say that. Doing those things will take a $2 million deficit down to, I want to say, in about the $700,000 range. That last $700,000 range is awful hard because it's cutting stuff. I just don't have any way around it. And I can present you some options, but I don't have any option that isn't going to make somebody mad again. And one I didn't mention, someone else isn't going to be happy with me. I don't think tourism needs to be funded at $130,000. We just can't afford it.
Well, and I know that's going to be a good discussion, but if they're getting this $400,000.
It's not to fund their operations, though. It's a different pot. But yes,
I think you're right, but why, I don't know if I know part of that gaming money can go towards tourism to fund that. So I don't know why you couldn't fund that.
Yeah,
Because,
well,
I mean, because they can still use them. I know it has criteria on percentages, but it ought to be able to fund tourism.
regardless, I just don't know how to justify funding it to that extent when we're in a position that we're at. You know, and if we didn't have the SID Center, I'd take $80,000 more out of that deficit, because 80,000 of the deficit is being transferred over to subsidize the SID
Well,
Center.
I honestly think that the city building should maybe be looked at before we have the budget.
And that might be one of the things that you're saying, but essentially you're saying you're kicking Roquette out.
No, I'm not. I'm saying we have a discussion and see how much they really want that. I mean, we need to find out if they have a long term.
Yeah.
Because it's only like a 2 or 3 year lease, correct?
It's only till 27, maybe
Yeah,
28.
it's like a 2 or 3 year
So-
lease, and then they have the right for another 2 years. We just need to find out if they're really serious about taking it, and if they are, then we need to re-sign the lease with them. We're actually paying something on it instead of getting everything.
Fair enough. But yeah, I don't have those answers for you now, but my goal is over the next couple of weeks to develop some options for you to look at. I don't want you to lose track of the budget presentations that are going to be made by these folks, because they got to make them. And it needs to be separate from what they're going to be presenting.
Yeah, but I'm not trying to beat the horse here. What I'm saying is that we're gonna have some serious cuts taken here if we do our job. And I don't think we should be subsidizing Roquette, to have the taxpayers' expense, and we are.
All right, so we've got 3 budget meetings already scheduled, right?
Yes. And on the backside of that, I think we'll have to have another one where we
Yeah.
talk through issues for what do we need to do. But I want to make sure they have a chance to present what they're doing for budgets. And it needs to be separate. It needs to be where they can talk about stuff and you ask questions of them.
And I guess the question I've asked you in the past too is, you've had conversations with the department heads about, this is the deficit that we're looking at. So, I mean, are we going to be getting, in these next meetings, are we going to be getting budgets that are the same level as our current budget, or are we going to be?
You're
seeing-
getting budgets that are essentially the current level of operations.
So,
Most of it will involve a change of service if you're looking to do it. And you know what, one of the things that you've mentioned to me was about even, can we save money within recreation by outsourcing mowing? You know, we'll tell you what, we've got a problem with how all of that is being done right now, because it's being subsidized by the bridge fund, which shouldn't be subsidizing operations. We've got $1.7 million sitting in a bridge fund that's supposed to be there to cover the costs of operating the bridge. Instead, it's covering our cost to mow. We don't have answers to it.
That, with the bridge, is there still a contract out with the loan?
It has never had
It's
an
never had
increase.
It's never had a yearly
And-
increase
So what we're looking to do is,
since 2016.
we're
It
looking,
did.
the
In
last increase,
2016,
Yeah.
an ordinance was set with a flat rate. An ordinance, which means an ordinance has to be changed to increase the rate. We've
so
already,
we had talked with them, and we're looking to change it in 2028, actually, not immediately, but in 2028, and to do 10% annual increases for 4 years, and then to do COLAs after that.
Yeah, 'cause we had done one about 20 years ago. We hadn't raised our rates in 15 years. So we went in there and did incremental raises on it, met with Griffithville, we met with Roquette, we met with the road.
Mhm.
We put percentages in there every year, but I didn't know there was a midnight.
There is no, with what we've had with the railroad for crossing the bridge, that's been a flat fee since 2016. And they recognize that they need to increase, but we're also going to be presenting to you a grant application for doing some renovations to that bridge, about $7 million.
7 to 10.
And they're going to throw in, I mean, not a huge amount, but they're doing the grant writing itself, and then they'll throw in 5% costs, and they know that on the back end, they're going to be covering an increase in what their per car fee is. Is it enough? I think that I had one sentence in there. I think we may be looking at more than 10% annual increases. I think it needs to be written in there that gives us the ability to,
So what the,
after
what
that,
the,
instead of COLAs, but to still be, will renegotiate, because I think we're still going to be shy. But the major problem with what our bridge fund is that we're funding 2.25 people out of it. And yeah, we need to have staff that covers it, but really their operations are doing other things. They're
predominantly.
predominantly.
They always have. It's kind of been one of those deals.
But
It used to have almost 4 million.
yeah, and with where we're at now, you can't justify charging a rate to the short line to cover your cost to subsidize what you're doing outside of the city. But they certainly need to be covering the operations of the bridge itself. But that doesn't do away with, we've got an issue, as we talk about a budget issue, I don't want to try to solve it this year with how the staffing is done and what we've got going on there, because we've already got such a problem with the general fund. But long-term, that's a structural problem that's going to have to be dealt with, too.
Yeah, because we did a study on it to see what it would cost us to tear it down. And it was going to be like, at that time, $2.5 million. At one time, it was $6 million for demolition. Some of that money was used over the years for this and that. And then we put in every tracks behind it. So they put heavier cars, which we didn't use those cars.
Yep.
So it's been a battle over the years, but there should always be an increase. Just on inflation.
Yep.
They didn't fall through. They didn't never do it, they just made us do it, but they didn't never use it. Well, that's what we gotta figure out.
So Jim, have you brought us up, you've shown where we were and you've shown where we are right now. Is that where you wanted to get us to tonight?
I've done as much as I could probably do more damage, and we're way over time. Because I think the time it gets unproductive.
And we'll have other opportunities.
Yes.
Are there other things people want to bring up while we're here? Discuss ad nauseum in the future. All right. I accept the motion to adjourn. Second. Those in favor?
Second?
All right, so we're